This video is going to be discussing the build diversity for Grandmaster content for team play and solo play. So this is essentially going to be reviewing all 30 subclasses, as there's 10 classes for the Titan, 10 subclasses for the Warlock, 10 for the Hunter. So there's a lot of classes in the game. What of those classes are useful for solo GM content, or for even for LFG Grandmasters? What do people think is the best, what, etc., and what's usable? Obviously, there's going to be a patch coming out that's going to change a couple of things, but for the most part, a lot of things are going to be relatively similar to what it is now for the solo stuff, for Grandmasters at least. Things might change team-wise, but I'm just going to talk about all the classes. Won't mention all the changes. You just have to read the tab yourself. I'm not going to go into and read it all through, but when I'm talking about something, I might say, oh, they're actually changing this. They're changing the dodge, or they're doing this, or they're doing that. So for the Hunter, what's useful for the solo GM environment? If you're going to solo Grandmaster, what classes can you use and be efficient with? I'm not saying that it's impossible to do a solo GM on a bad subclass, because I've done them myself. I'm just saying, what's the average player going to lean to? Because they're not going to put themselves through pain for a video, because the chances are they're not making a video. They're wanting to do it because they need some mats, they need some materials. So they want to be efficient while they're doing it. So what classes are useful on the Hunter? I'll start with the worst. So we've got Arc Staff. The identity of Arc Strider is all pretty much the same. Top tree, middle tree, bottom tree. Bottom tree has a good neutral game. You can gain a lot of melee and great energy when you critically wounded, which is handy, but for the most part the super is really bad for bottom tree. Middle tree, the super is even worse. And for top tree, it's probably the best, highest damage output for it. The problem is that they're buffing combination blow. So they're not buffing it, they're just reducing the cooldown from like 96 seconds, the base cooldown, to 15. Which means you're going to get your melee quite a lot. The problem with that for Grandmasters is this. When you use melee-based builds in Grandmasters, they are less efficient than what they are in a Master or below, for content-wise. Why is that? Well, because an Acolyte can get you one shot melee. One melee will get you in the red, and then you get a projectile from another enemy, one shot you. So melee-based builds, and the reward to risk ratio for them is too high. They're too risky. No one wants to do them, right? And it's plainly obvious, because the Grandmasters is how they work, the Grandmasters. So it's less of the subclass's fault and more of the activity itself, but they can't base everything around Grandmasters. But the problem is, if you're a PvE player taking this game seriously, like you've played for a couple of years, what are you doing? Well, in PvE, you're only doing a couple of things. You're doing your raids, you're doing lost sectors for farming exotics, and you're doing the Grandmasters, that's it. And getting the titles. That is all you're doing. So whatever you're doing, you may as well enjoy yourself while doing it. But as I said, you can't, because you're limited to so many subclasses. So Arc Strider, all of them, they're not viable for solo GM play. Then we go to Gunslinger. So we've got top tree, middle tree, bottom tree. The only usable class is Wave the Sharpshooter, because you get super regeneration from practice makes perfect. You can farm this off a champ and then super that champ. The golden gunshot won't one-shot the champ, even with Celestial Nighthawk, but you'll do a good chunk of damage, and it's also really good for boss damage. So being able to farm super up is really good. So this class is good, it's usable, but will the average player be able to use it? I don't think so, because it's got no survivability aspects around it. It's just high damage glass cannon type setup. Depends on how skillful you are and how well you know the GM that we're talking about, whatever GM it is. So if you really have the high knowledge about that GM and you know you can get away with it, you can use Wave the Sharpshooter, but for the most part you can't. But I'll put it in the list that you can use this build if you use Celestial Nighthawk, obviously. You'd have to equip Celestial Nighthawk to make it viable. Wave 1,000 Cuts used to be the most powerful sort of one-shot type super in Forsaken, then they nerfed it, and then they nerfed it again, and then nerfed it some more. It shipped too strong basically with the Shards of Galanor, which gives you super regeneration. Today, it gives you half super regen. So if you super a champion, you'll get half your super back. That's a good trade-off. The problem is the damage it does to a GM champion isn't high enough to make someone want to pick Blade Barrage. So if you go into an LFG GM, it's like, well, I'm going to pick Blade Barrage. They're going to ask you to go Revenant. They're going to ask you to go Night Stalker. They're going to ask you to take that off because it's no good. And that's what we don't want. You want Blade Barrage to be in the meta. Like, it's an amazing style type of super. It's unique. But they continue just to sort of not buff it in the right instances. Give it a big damage buff, like what they did with Thunder Crash. Maybe make it an exotic other than Shards of Galanor that gives you a raw damage output for Blade Barrage. I don't know. Because they seem to like making exotics to solve balancing issues. So do that. Top 3, we don't even need to talk about it. For PvE, it's not viable. I have soloed a GM with 6-shooter. But for the most part, it's a PvP class. Okay, it's not usable in solo GM environment. Then we go to Night Stalker. So Night Stalker, Way of the Wraith, middle tree Night Stalker. It's no good for PvE solo play. Team play not good. The server's not good enough. The neutral gameplay, it has some things about it, but all this stuff takes too long to sort of think about. I mean, it is flawless execution. There is some good things about it, but it's not good enough to say, right, I'm going to use Way of the Wraith. Okay, so then you're left with top 3 and bottom 3. Top 3, bottom 3 Night Stalker are getting a nerf as the next patch. So what they're doing is they're giving 2 different cooldowns to Marksman's Dodge and Gambler's Dodge. Marksman's Dodge, a T10 ability, will be a 14-second cooldown. That's a 3-second nerf. And then Gambler's Dodge will be an 18-second cooldown at 100% mobility. The problem is the invisibility is linked to your dodge. Okay, for the most part, like bottom 3. So the classic setup for bottom 3 is you go 6 Coyote or Omnioculus, depends on what you're doing. You go that and then you use 100% mobility, and then you can dodge, get your you put on Gambler's Dodge, and you just keep getting your invis back. So you've got some survivability. You can work with it on a GM. Now, I think they left it in the game this strong for so long because it gives people a fighting chance in GMs. They even said about it in a TWAB. You read between the lines. When you read the TWABs, people don't read between the lines. But if you actually read what they're saying between the lines, like they said, you can use a smoke bomb in GMs, you can do this, you can do that. And you read it and you're like, oh, right. So they actually know that people crutch on Night Stalker, but they leave it in the game on intention, not nerfing it. They intentionally, but now they've decided to sort of nerf it. And it is getting nerfed. So it's not going to be as usable, bottom 3 or top 3. However, there's still going to be some invisibilities going around. I'm not going to cover them right now. Like, you can use Omnioculus still. You're still going to be able to do that. Maybe do a strength type build. There's still going to be ways and means of getting your invis up quite frequently, just not as good as it is now. Top 3 is getting nerfed because when you dodge, they've nerfed it. So when you used to dodge now, you would lose all enemy tracking. For PvE, like Shriekers would stop tracking you. That's going to be different now. So when you dodge with Vanishing Step, all enemy, like not all enemies, but tracking shots, tracking projectiles will track you. You know, those Blight Orb things, Shriekers, all that stuff's going to track you when you invis, and that's unfortunate. I kind of liked having a superior invisibility on top 3 as opposed to bottom 3, because the trade-off was bottom 3 gives you more invisibility, but the invisibility is less potent. Top 3 gives you less invisibility, but the invisibility is more potent. I love that trade-off, and they're doing away with it. I mean, it's a bad choice in my eyes, but that's what they're doing. I think that these 2 classes are still usable. Okay, they will be. And now we go on to Revenant. So Revenant's a really good class, and it is now. It's going to be even better. They're buffing it hugely. I'm not going to go through all the Stasis Crystals buffs, the Shatter Dive buff and all. I'm not going to talk about everything. I'm just going to say Revenant is really good now, so it's going to even be better after the patch. Like, it's going to be probably the king of solo play. Now, the builds that you can use with Revenant are things like Assassin's Cowl. So when you get a powered melee kill or a finisher, you get invisibility and healing. This is exceptional for staying alive in GMs. Okay, so it's going to be one of the best builds, if not the best. There's a couple of people who've showcased the build, like actually using it in solos and stuff. I'm not showcasing it in that sense right now. I'm just telling you, try out Assassin's Cowl with Revenant. It's one of the best builds in the game and will be even better. Or you could use Whelmer's Crown. It won't be quite as effective. Or any neutral-based exotics like Tracer or Frosties. Frosties gives you ability energy when you're sprinting, right? So the more ability energy you get on this class, the better, because the melee's strong, the Withering Blade's really strong. The Glacier grenades, Dustfield grenades are really strong on anti-barrier champs. If you have Whisper of Durance on, you can essentially just solo one phase anti-barrier champ on GM, right? As long as you're a Dustfield and your timing's right. It's very strong. So everything about Revenant, I'm not going to go into all the builds now, but I'm just going to say it's one of the best classes to solo anything with. So that's top. So those are the recommendations for the Hunter, which overall, I would say, as I say, you could say, right, one of the Night Stalker classes is still kind of viable. Revenant definitely is. Gunslinger, at a push, is for me viable, but for the average player, it might not be viable. They're not going to be like, well, I don't want to do this. I'd rather go something else. Because, yeah, you're getting the super, but what else are you getting? The grenade's not very good. The neutral play's not very good. There's no survivability. The knife's not very good. So I can understand that. So looking at it objectively, there's only like 3 classes you could say that are really usable on the Hunter for solo GM, and that's bad. Okay, so now we'll go to Warlock. So there's not much changes happening next month with the Warlock, so I'm just going to tell you what's viable as of now, right? As of today, what's viable. So I'll start with Shadebinder. So Shadebinder has a couple of different builds, but the main build is getting nerfed. So Bleak Watcher itself is getting nerfed. They've stated in the TWAB is the Bleak Watcher grenade recharge rate will be the same as a Glacier grenade recharge rate. So they're insinuating that the Bleak Watcher aspect itself, the grenade regen is going to be different. Now, I haven't seen gameplay of that to say, right, this is what it's going to be, right? But I'm just saying it's not going to be quite as good, but there'll be ways and means of getting more Bleak Watcher turrets up. Because there's class ability mods and things. There's Bomber. There's having max discipline will help and stuff like that. There'll be ways and means around it. Like, it which won't be quite as good as now, but it's still going to be exceptional, the Bleak Watcher's help. Obviously, you can build your fragments and your aspects to whatever you do and whatever your build is. There's various builds. Okay, I'm not going to go into them all here. Obviously, there's the Aegis Scepter type build where you can solo one-phase champs with this Stasis Trace Rifle. Okay, it's exceptional. And it gels and builds really well with all the fragments and the aspects of the Stasis class. You can pair it with the Stag, the exotic helmet, which gives you heal and rift energy when you're critically wounded. Happens all the time in solo GMs. This is one of the best builds for safety in GMs. End of discussion. Right? There's other sort of helmets you can use. You can use Eye of Another World. I prefer the Stag, and the Stag is not getting nerfed at all, so it's going to still be exceptional. So, you know, obviously just make sure you're rocking high discipline, high recovery when you use this type of setup, though. So Shadebinder is a big yes. The soup is exceptional. You know, there's a lot of things. So now we go on to Voidwalker. So Voidwalker, we've got top tree, Nova Warp, and bottom tree. I can automatically tell you Devour, no, not for GMs. Okay, I'm not getting into why, but no, it won't be usable. For Nova Warp, it's getting an increased damage 30% for champions and bosses. That's what it states. I'm still not fixed on that buff, whether it's going to be enough. And the one reason is this. Imagine you're fighting an anti-barrier champion. You get the first break shield. Right? You take 20% HP off that champ. You get your first shield break with your auto rifle. Then you pop your super. Is that super going to do enough damage to one cycle that barrier on your own? If the answer is no, it's not usable. Usable for ads, but I'm grading a super on its ad clear and its ability to take champions and bosses. And you need to get close to a boss, he may stomp you, so I'm not fixed on Nova One, whether it's going to be actually good or not. Like, let's not make this a novelty thing where we're just looking at it and saying, oh, I wish it's actually kind of good. Well, is it actually good though? You know, and I don't know. So top 3 Nova Bomb is the classic. Pair that with Vortex Grenade, and then you put on the Exotic Gauntlets Controverse Hold. It's the go-to build. You would run 100% discipline. Now they're changing Controverse Hold because there's an RNG element to grenade energy that you receive back. They're going to change it to a fixed time. I'm not going to tell you the time right now. I'm not going to load up the 12 and find out what that is. But essentially it's going to be very similar to how it works now. Okay, you're still going to get plenty of grenades with this setup. It's one of the best solo GM builds to use flat out because you can charge your grenade with Curse Accelerant onto those ads, throw it onto those ads, and then hide in cover. Those ads will explode because of bloom, and then you get your grenade back to rinse and repeat. You can do this to bosses, champs. You can just farm your grenades, and it's one of the best grenades in the game for solo play. End of discussion with that. So, and the Nova Bomb puts out raw, decent burst damage against a boss. You can Nova Bomb and then retreat. That's a big thing. So there's huge benefits. It's like in the top 3 classes to solo with for the Voidwalker. The other 2, not so much. So now we go to Stormcaller. So we've got top tree Storm, bottom tree Storm. They have the same type of identity. I'm not going to get into all the perks between the 2. I'm just going to say overall these 2 classes aren't worth it. Okay, there is builds that you can use like Storm Dancer's Brace. When you have the stars aligned and you get all your arc kills when you need them, you'll get one of the highest damage supers in the game with Storm Dancer's Brace, and then bottom tree Storm. You're going to get a lot of damage, especially with Landfall buff. The problem is with it is it's not ease of use. There's better supers to use. The Arc Soul build's really good on this, and I will make a video about it in the future, but for the most part, it's out of the reign of like top classes to solo with. I'm not saying you can't, I'm just saying it's not that very good. Top 3 the same. Like if your Arc Bolt's not killing an ad, and you're using Crown of Tempests, I'm going on me, but if you're using that, then the build falls apart because you're not getting your Arc ability chain kills going. So it's no good. Now we go to Chaos Reach. Chaos Reach is one of the best classes in the game because of its raw damage output. You pair that with the exotic boots, the Geomag Stabilizers, which extends Chaos Reach. You don't get the super regen you used to once you've used it. You know, you're not getting the same amount of super, but Ionic Trace is built into the class. Defeating enemies has a chance to create Ionic Trace. Ionic Trace grants energy to all your abilities. You get so much super from it. And you got Pulse Wave. When you're critically wounded, you get that speed boost. I mean, that's a big deal. Like you need to be on the move, especially on those, solo games when you're at a boss, proving ground, something. You get one shot, you can sort of avoid fire because of this. It's such a good mod. Such a good perk. So Chaos Reach is highly rated. I say yes, it's very good. So now we go to Dawnblade. This is the last tree. We've got top tree. Now top tree Dawnblade used to be really good in a previous season because of a mod called Solo Unstoppable Melee that works on champions. So you could stop a champion via a solo melee. Celestial Fire is a ranged solo melee. So this meant that you could diversify your loadout and not run an unstoppable weapon, and then you could, run other things. I can't grade this super though because that mod isn't up this season, and it's not a permanent mod. So I'm going to say top tree Dawnblade is only for speedrunners who speedrun low end content. The Icarus dashing and they're using swords and doing all that stuff. That's fine and that's fun to watch, but when you really nail down to it, is it good for GMs? It isn't. It's terrible. Now we go to Well of Radiance. Well of Radiance is a team play exotic, and if you use Power Preservation on your helmet, so you would run a Stasis helmet, which I don't have on this class right now. It's in the vault, I would say, but it's a mod called Power Preservation, so you double your orb generation for your team. If you pair that with a Titaness, a Furiosa, and then maybe Hunter with Teva or Revenant, you're just going to keep getting orbs. The problem is when you go to a solo play for Well of Radiance, it's not as viable, but I would say it is viable because it is well. The only problem is, I would say, is Well of Radiance gives a false sense of security. So when you're thinking in a GM like Hallelujah, am I going to go well? That'll save me. It won't save you, I'm afraid. It gives you a false sense of security, and you'll be killing ads solo in a well, and you'll just die. You'll get sniped out your well, and you'll be like, why did that happen? And you'll be thinking, well, hang on a sec. If I was solo and I had a different type of super, I wouldn't have been standing where I stood. So well placement is so important, but it's one of those things. I would just say that Well Radiance is fine, but there's better things. It cuts the grade, but only just. If you use Starfire Protocol, you get an extra fusion grenade, right? Then you go to your Dawnblade class and put on fusion grenade. You get double divine protection. So that is a decent build because you're getting 2 get out of free jail card things going on, right? So you one shot, use your divine protection. You get one shot again, then use it again. By the time you might get another one. if you haven't run a high discipline. So that's a good build for solo play for well range, but I wouldn't recommend it. Voidwalker excels way better because you're actually dealing with the adds. Chaos Reach, way better. Shadebinder, way better. Well, just it gives you a false sense of security for the solo play. Then we go to the final Dawnblade tree, a Tournament of Flame. So this is bottom tree Dawnblade. This is probably the best subclass in the game, and will be after next patch. Now, why is that? Well, I kind of laugh and giggle at myself, people who are just starting to experience bottom tree Dawnblade, because I've been playing it since 2017, and the good things is about it that it Everlasting Fire extends your super, so you can get a lot of, you can have your super last so long by killing enemies in PvE. Even on GM, because they buffed this tree, the solar damage you do to adds, it has like a chaining effect to other adds and they explode. One of the best Roman servers in the game, okay? And it's got an amazing neutral game, right? So it's got so the super from Fated for the Flame, Everlasting Fire, buffs the super, exceptional. And then you got Phoenix Dive. So this perk is like one of the best perks in the game overall, because when you jump in midair, when you descend, depending on how high you were, you get health regen, like a healing rift, but it's not tied to your healing rift. So you can jump behind cover, regen, you get naded, you can jump in the air, use your Phoenix Dive. One of the best solo classes in the game, and even in team. Okay, just for ad clear, it melts ads on GMs. And if you pair it with Dawn Chorus, the exotic helmet, you improve it even further. Okay, you melee a champ when he's stunned, then pop your super, you will kill that champion solo on your own with no question with Dawn Chorus. Because when you melee the champ, you get maximum stacks from Dawn Chorus. One of the best classes in the game, and if you think it's bad, it's because you haven't tested it properly. One of the best classes in the game. So that's Dawnblade, so bottom tree, I highly recommend it. Well ranged, just cuts the grade. Voidwalker top tree is good. Chaos Reach is good. Shadebinder is good. So the Warlock has loads of stuff available to it. So I've covered all that. We'll go to the last class, which is Titan. The Titan's getting loads of changes to its barricade kind of. They're just altering base regen rates. Does it matter in the end? No, it doesn't. Like, they're still going to work relatively the same as they are now. They're changing a lot of shoulder charge changes, a lot of changes to strikers, top tree and bottom tree, but for the most part, none of it matters. There's only one build that's going to change, kind of different. So what can you solo GMs with on a Titan? What builds are good? Well, the first build, this is more team play, I suppose. Code of the Commander. So Code of the Commander middle tree. If you rock that with Ursa Furiosa, you get your Sentinel Shield. For the most part, nothing can penetrate a Sentinel Shield, enemy-wise. Sometimes Corrupted Boss has been known to do it, but for the most part, nothing can really penetrate that shield. So if you pop it on top of a well in a team, generate orbs with power preservation, like I said earlier, this is the mod here. You double your orbs, basically. I think you can get up to 12 orbs. So it works well with power preservation as a Furiosa. So you're just getting lots of Sentinel Shields back. For solo play, it's different. You don't use Ursa Furiosa for solo play. It makes no sense to do it. Right? So this is where middle tree loses out solo-wise. But the grenade is exceptional. Controlled demolition is exceptional because you get void detonators to all the targets. So it's exceptional that way. So you can still make it work. What you would do is swap. Swap to Sympaceps, get the increased super damage that you get from it. Right? I know it buffs melee range, but that's not why it's on for. You just get super... you'll be able to actually kill champions with this. But you need to be really skillful with it. Okay? So that's a build choice, but then also I think it's even better than that is Heart of Inmost Light, because as I said before, melee based builds in GMs don't work so well. Grenade builds do. So on the Titan you can have that with Heart of Inmost Light. Every 17 seconds or so with Bomber, you need Bomber on there, right? Make sure you have that on. You can get a grenade. Because of how Heart and Most Light works. It's actually getting a slight buff because of how empowered buffs stacks work. They've mentioned about it. I'm not going to go into it. Essentially, you can get your Void Wall Grenade, which is an exceptional grenade, or even Suppressor's not too bad, but Void Wall is exceptional for damage on tanks, champs. It just does so much damage. To floating targets, it's not good though. Magnetic's also really good. So Heart of Inmost Light, Core of the Commander is exceptional. Core of the Aggressor is really bad because it's based on your super. It's a melee based super sentinel. Okay, so it's not that good. Core of the Commander melts, like there's no question there, but bottom tree doesn't. So you can go with Doomfang Pauldrons for a super build type thing. The problem is the shield itself doesn't do enough damage, and it hasn't got the benefit of controlled demolition from middle tree, so bottom tree isn't so good. And then lastly we go to top tree. Top tree has the benefit of using a bubble, Ward of Dawn. Now people often have heard them criticise bubble, that it's old fashioned, it doesn't have any place because you've got banner shield. I would go against that and say no. If a boss is sword friendly, like League of Shadows or something like that, you can pop a bubble on top of them and saw them to death with Lament or any decent sword, right? So bubble always has a place in PvE, and if you're not using your bubble in that sense and you're using your bubble from a distance, say it's anti-barrier scout or whatever it might be that particular season, bubble's really good. You can just pop your bubble to your left or to your right and then just strafe in and out your bubble, getting the benefit of getting increased weapon damage to all the enemies. And if you're in a team focusing on a champ down, all of you get 35% damage bonus. So Ward of Dawn's exceptional. The melee aspects of this build falls apart on the GM, and I've already explained why. So those two are good. Now we go on to Thunder Crash. So Thunder Crash is exceptional for the solo player as well, because this tree didn't get a lot of love until recently. When they brought out the Fallen of the Curious of the Fallen Star, which buffs Thunder Crash damage exceptional, to the point where you can solo one phase a Barrier Knight almost. It does about 90% damage, I believe, 90 to 95, which is enough to one phase them, essentially. So it's like one of the best. And you get an overshield. When you hit the target, you get an overshield for protection, so it gives you some survivability, this. Okay? So there's that. Top tree, bottom tree strikers are getting like a buff overall, but they're also getting like a slight nerf. There's a lot of things going on with them, but it doesn't matter because they're both melee based builds and they have no longevity, they have no survivability, they have nothing to offer you as a solo player, so don't be going them. It's a sad thing to say, but it's just how it is. It's not the class's fault, it's the way GMs are built, just the way they're built. Then we go to Sunbreaker. So Sunbreaker, we've got top tree, middle tree, bottom tree. So top tree is in a real bad place because they've even nerfed Hammer Strike now. It actually takes longer to get it back next month. So if it wasn't already bad, I mean, it's good, but it's so 2017, this ability. Like, you debuff an enemy when you hit them. Yeah, that's fine, it's melting point, but it doesn't even last long enough. It's 5 seconds, not enough. What they should have done is buff that. Like, have it so that maybe when you run, when you've got a Hammer Strike, you gain an overshield. Have it built into it. I know there's exotics that do that. Have it built into it so that when you're running towards a target, you've got some sort of overshield, hit them, and that really stuns them, right? Maybe give it some sort of like champion capability stun. Maybe have it so it's like good against unstoppables, because they can do that. They've already done it with certain exotics. But they haven't done that, so this class is unusable. It's literally unusable for GM content, so I wouldn't recommend it. Middle tree obviously is the king of like sort of Vault of Glass. Right? It's one of the best ability-based damage things, because you've got Heart of Inmost Light. That will stack with Roaring Flames, which stacks up to 3 times. Right? You've got it there. The problem is there's no survivability so much with this. There is, because when you pick up your hammer, you get health regen. But again, if GM ads didn't hit you so hard melee-wise, this build would show itself a little bit more. I'm not saying you can't solo GM with this class. You certainly can. You certainly could, and I believe people have done. I'm just saying to the average player, it's out of reach. They're not going to go this. What they're going to do instead is go bottom tree, Core of the Siegebreaker. Reason for that is because of its health regen perks. So you've got your Sun Warrior Sunspot build. Sunspot build, like, it's probably one of the best Titan builds, in my opinion. So solar abilities restore your health, right? They also create sunspots. So for each grenade kill, it'll create a sunspot on the floor, and then ads will walk into that sunspot and extend it. You'll walk into the sunspot and get a buff to your ability regen for 5 seconds. You'll also get sunspots from your super when you use it. You'll create a sunspot when you're standing on the floor when you pop your super, and it puts out decent-ish damage. It's more of like a damage over time thing. I would like to see hammers give it a little bit of a PvE damage bonus, just a little bit, man, like 10-15%. But right now it's in a good spot. Sunspot build because it keeps you alive. It's got survivability factors about it. So, and also if you pair it with certain exotics like Heart of Inmost Light, Phoenix Cradle, Armentarium, Hallowfire Heart, the options go on and on and on. I'm not here to tell you what the best is, but I'm going to tell you there's loads of options for Sunbreaker. And then lastly, we come on to Behemoth. So I have solo GM with Behemoth a couple of times in the past, in seasons gone by, and I can say that it's nowhere near as good as Revenant or Shadebinder, so there's a problem with Behemoth. It's the super itself. But with all the stasis buffs, will be interesting to see what it does. But what my issue with Behemoth is, it just doesn't do the damage it should. You can one phase a barrier champion if you play smart with one super. It's really difficult, but you can do it because you can pair it with Symphoceps. So you can pair it with Symphoceps to assist there, or you could go for a grenade build, go Armentarium, so you go double Duskveil Grenade. No class can do that, so that's a big pro to the Behemoth, is you can go double Duskveil. Why is that so important? Well, one Duskveil Grenade equals a death of a champ. You throw one Duskveil with Whisper of Durance, the Duskveil will last long enough for you to one phase that champ, one cycle it. I'm not saying Behemoth's good, it's kind of bad. But they're going to buff it for Diamond Lance, so you're going to be able to get Diamond Lances from Stasis Weapon kills. Now, I haven't got a Stasis Weapon on here to show you, but the hand cannon or the sidearm, more likely the hand cannon, you'll be able to do a Diamond Lance build with Behemoth. So we'll be interested to see how that works. I don't know how that's going to work. So Behemoth right now, I would say, is really bad, but it may become really good next season. Not next season, next month. So that was the recommendations on the Titan and the Warlock and the Hunter. As I said, for the Titan, there's not a lot for you, unfortunately. One class for Sunbreaker, really viable. 2 for Sentinel, 1 for Thunder Crash. And Behemoth isn't viable right now, so there's nothing for the Titan. The Warlock has a subclass for each element that's viable. The Hunter has not as much, and they went too hard with the nerfs on the Hunter, in my opinion. But that's what I believe is usable and not usable in the GMs. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you.